You're listening to the Actors Resource with Alice Kwong, a podcast for actors and improvisers, with interviews from entertainment industry experts.
Shawn Maus is sincere, frank, curious, ambitious, and humorous, or so he's been told. Review writer, mentor, screenwriter, playwright, and life adventurer. Shawn has produced at least 3 short films, including indie film circuit favorite Living Under Linda's Desk. Shawn's written numerous screenplays and theatrical plays and has been recognized for his video production work by the National School Public Relations Association Ohio chapter. He has been a high school theater teacher as well as teaching at a college theater. He is the co-founder and artistic director of Cincinnati Radio Actors Theater, dedicated to keeping the art of radio theater alive for future generations. Welcome, Shawn Maus.
As one of our special guests. Just real quick, Shawn, we met at a boot camp for copywriting, but it seems most of your experience has been in entertainment. You've had a varied career, and how can you explain about that?
Okay, explain my varied career.
Yes.
Maybe it's ADHD. I don't know. I love to try new things. And I've come from a lot of different angles. This is kind of ironic that you asked this question because it really started for me 40 years ago when I saw Star Wars for the first time. Mm-hmm. My aunt took me to this movie that everybody was seeing, and I wasn't really a movie kind of guy. I mean, I went, but I just didn't know that they could make movies like that. And I came out of the theater going, I so want to do that. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of got me really focused into movies and TV and theater kind of stuff. I was always doing, little puppet shows and putting on little skits and stuff when I was a kid growing up. So I kind of knew entertainment was where I wanted to be, but I didn't, at 12 years old, you really don't know how you're going to focus it. When I was in college, I interned at 30 Rock in New York.
No way.
I hated it.
Oh, really?
I hated it. I mean, I was just a page, running back and forth and doing all that stuff. But I did not like New York. I didn't. Although I'm snarky as a New Yorker, but
you are?
Oh God, yeah.
I haven't seen that side of you yet.
Oh yeah. Wow. But so then the following year, I interned at Paramount and just fell in love with Los Angeles. Just absolutely fell in love with it. One of the things that I did discover when I was teaching in Miami is I love the teaching aspect. I just do. And California on top of it and theater. So it's just the right combination of stuff for me. And I did a lot of that. And I guess when you and I met, I was kind of looking to do something different. And I got that letter in the mail that said, you can be the writer's life thing and be a copywriter. But I thought, that's probably the next natural transition to take my writing skills and my storytelling skills and apply it to something that I think was going to be a little more stable. It turned out that it was more of a freelance thing for me because it still wasn't what I wanted to do per se. While I enjoyed the copywriting side of stuff, I just didn't like making a go of it as a full-time thing.
Right.
So I spent some time in California, and when I came back here for family reasons, my dad had cancer, and I came back to do the dutiful son thing. And he hung on more than the 3 months that they said he was going to do, and so I needed to find a job, and I ended up becoming a high school theater teacher, and then became their communications director as well. And it just kind of blossomed from there. This is what I tell kids and folks all the time. Always look for the next great adventure because it's always going to be something. I'm not one of those people who like to get pigeonholed into one thing.
Right. And did you actually have script writing experience before you went into the copywriting?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I was a scab during...
Oh, no!
Yes, I know. Boo hiss. I can hear everybody now. So, I ended up becoming a scab on a television show and wrote several scripts there. And I had done some movies, both treatments and pitching. I did a lot of pitching. A lot of pitching.
Was this when you were in California, in the LA area? Okay.
Yes, yeah. Because at that time, this was the late 80s, early 90s. This thing called the internet didn't happen. The call you and I are on right now, which is basically free. At this point, we've been talking, about 5 minutes? Probably about $15 long distance on Ma Bell back in the day.
Yeah.
So you had to be there. You had to be in LA for a number of reasons. If you're doing television, yes, because it's a weekly series and you needed to be in the writer's room to hear the pitches and work with, it could be anywhere from 5 to 10 writers to as many as 20 to 30, depending on the show that you were in, whether it's drama or comedy or anything. So, so I had a bunch of scripts kind of hidden in my back pocket that I had developed during college and thought that I was going to be the big shot and just go on out there and everything was going to be a piece of cake. But I was fortunate enough to get an internship with Paramount Studios and learned a lot through that and made a lot of connections. For me, not only is it a great adventure, but I think the other piece of advice I always give folks is it's all about the networking. It's all about the networking and figuring out who knows who, and they may know you, because that's how I secured a lot of jobs, just through all the networking connections that I had made throughout my career.
Nice. But right now, you're in Ohio, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm in Ohio.
Currently.
OHIO, for anybody that's a Ohio State fan, go ahead and shout it out. I was not an Ohio State person, but that's okay.
And while you're there currently, you started a radio theater company.
I did. I've always loved radio theater, radio drama. And my grandfather collected old-time radio shows. And at that time, they were on LPs or vinyl for the millennial generation.
Yep.
And he had a great collection of them. And then in high school, my history teacher also was a big old-time radio buff. And he had a massive collection. And he had this dream of syndicating these things around, taking them around. And we did this. We actually took them around to local nursing homes and dropped off a bunch of them, and then went around the next week and dropped off another round and took that round to another. It was just the old syndication thing. And the more I was listening to these things and just what you could do in your imagination. And then I started learning more about it and how you created sound effects. They weren't done on the computer with GarageBand and all that sort of stuff. So I taught a course at Miami University
recently,
this past spring semester. Yep.
Okay.
And they were looking to fill some classes to give kids a different take. And it was out of the theater department, out of the College of Creative Arts. And I knew the program chair through another networking connection thing that I had done. And she was fascinated with the idea of radio theater. My friend Mike and I had started just doing radio theater shows. When I was a high school theater teacher, we had approached the kids about it, and they weren't all that interested in it. So I had done a Fringe festival. I don't know if you guys know about the Fringe. We had gone to Edinburgh and done the Fringe festival there with high school kids. And then there's a local Fringe festival here in Cincinnati. And I had directed a show that a friend of mine had written, and we staged it kind of as a hybrid, staged reading, movement, and theater stuff, but the actors carried their scripts with them, and we blocked it, per se, like you would do a regular theater show, but we then had radio sound effects, the old-fashioned stuff. So if a door opened, the actor couldn't walk through a door because we had a very small staging set, but we had a door that we would open, and we did horse clopping with plungers and all that sort of stuff. So it was really kind of cool, and I got this idea of, why can't we do this all the time? So my friend Mike and I literally decided, let's start a troupe that does radio drama. And that's how we got this thing going. We use a lot of local talent here in town. We don't have a performance space like the Atlanta Radio Theater Company, but we go around to libraries and nursing homes and community events. We just did one at the Grove for a dinner theater show. So we do these kind of one-offs, I like to call them. And then we actually, when I was at Miami, LA Theater Works came to do a production, and I insisted that my students see it. And somebody in the audience, there was a talk back afterwards, and one of the folks asked, well, how difficult is it to be going from being an actor to doing sound effects? And the sound effects guy said, well, it's funny, there's no classes for this. I had to learn everything on the internet. my students raise their hands and, well, actually there is, because we're learning it now. So
nice.
Absolutely. So we've been in touch with the LA Theater Works folks since that happened about 2 months ago.
Cool.
It's been really cool just comparing notes and talking about radio theater. And so we're kind of keeping it alive for the future generations. You can come into any environment. We've done it in small little things like a coffee shop, and just bring in our little tour of sound effects, manual sound effects, and do it all right there so people can see it as well as imagine it in their minds.
So there is blocking then?
There was during the Fringe. What I do now is I try to recreate as close as possible to what radio drama was in the 40s and the 50s during the Golden Age. And that's been done through a lot of research on the internet, seeing how Orson Welles staged Mercury Theater on the Air with War of the Worlds and stuff like that. So no, the actors don't do all that moving around on stage now as much as we used to do. We've gone back to the more pure form of radio drama.
Okay. And what's the name of your radio theater company?
We are the Cincinnati Radio Actors Theater.
Nice.
We have a Facebook page that you can go out and like us and see what we're doing. We're going to launch a website here soon because suddenly after the Miami University experience, really took off. I've had several groups call me. I had a church call to do a production. We've got hopefully a standing gig coming up with a major group here in Cincinnati, the Media Heritage Group, and that's what they do. They try to preserve old-time radio shows, and they have a museum here in town dedicated solely to that, so they would like us to come up and do a couple of shows during the weekends that the museum is open. So that's pretty cool.
Very cool. Now, because this podcast is geared for actors and improvisers, like for this kind of radio theater, do you always create original works or do you improvise? How does that happen?
A little bit of both. Because radio is live. We try to do it as a live thing. I have adapted some stuff that's in public domain. I've done The Count of Monte Cristo. We have done Dracula. And then there are other shows that are written specifically for radio performances. And the beauty is I do have access to the old-time radio shows, scripts, because of my connection with Media Heritage. And that's one of the things I'm working on now is an adaptation of a radio serial that one DJ here in town would do every day on his radio show. And he was like 9 different voices. So we're trying to condense all those skits into 1 hour-long performance that we're going to try to pitch to the Fringe Festival for next year. So it's a combination of stuff. It truly is. From an acting standpoint, for what your audience might be interested in, that improv, you need that in radio drama. You have to bring those words that are on that page to life in the audience's mind. Usually what we do when we do the radio shows is we encourage folks to go ahead and close your eyes. Don't fall asleep, but go ahead and close your eyes and imagine it as if you were listening to it. And there are things that are in a script that you and I know as actors that we can gesture and we can do these sorts of things, but there's a lot that you have to improvise in your voice and modulate your voice. Very similar to voiceover work that you need to find hidden in the script. I have one actor, for example, when we did Dracula, the character of Renfield, if you're familiar with that story, Renfield is the guy that's locked up in the insane asylum, and he gradually progresses through the scene from eating flies and bugs and cockroaches to spiders and birds. And when we rehearsed the scene, he was just delivering the lines. I'm like, okay, we have to come up with a way to hear this. So the actor improvised this whole thing. Started off with just chewing a piece of gum. Then he would take the gum out of his mouth. And then it became chewing on a pretzel. And then he progressed into biting into an apple and chewing the apple so that you got the sound effect of the different things that he was eating.
Yeah.
And it was brilliant. I mean, I never would have come up with that. That was where the actor in his creative genius came up with, okay, let me try to improvise this. And he just literally did it on the spot. It was fantastic.
That's awesome. And like, when you speak about rehearsals, though, how much do the radio theater actors rehearse before a show?
Because I use semi-professional actors that have had some acting training, we really, Alice, honestly, we only rehearse about 8 hours. And with this group, because these are, different actors, they may be in different shows throughout the city here, we only get together maybe 2 hours over the course of 4 weeks. Then we come together. The first 2 hours are probably like a read through, a table read. And then we never leave the table, quite honestly, because there's no action that we have to block. So the next 4 hours, the next 2 rehearsals are really just analyzing that script and getting into those characters. And in some cases, I'll hire actors that can do 3 or 4 different voices. Like Dracula was really 17 different characters, and I had 5 actors.
Okay. And for those actors that are new, could you explain what a table read is?
Sure. Table read is where everybody just gets around a table. You have your script and you read it for the first time. Hopefully, you've gotten the script a little bit in advance so you can kind of do your character analysis and things like that. But with radio drama, I don't really know until I've sat in the room with those folks who I'm going to double up voices. So the table read is where you're just really sitting around and exploring the script. You read through it from top to bottom, and then the director will take notes and kind of go back. In our case, after that first hour, I'll give the actor a little bit of coaching, and I'm thinking we want to go this way, or what do you feel about portraying this? How you feel about this character, what they're going through. And then we refine that during the second hour. So table read, in a sense, is just sitting around and reading the story.
And so you've hired the actors, but you haven't decided which actors would play which characters yet. A couple questions. Do you primarily direct for these radio theater productions for the Cincinnati Radio Actors Theater? And how do you decide who to hire before the table read?
Yeah. First off, I'll start with how do I decide to hire? I post the notice. We've got just like LA does and stuff like that. There's a core group of actors that So I'll call my friends. I'll go, hey,
so it is networking. It is who you know.
Absolutely. I'll go, are you free this weekend?
Yeah.
Because we're not working on a regular basis, and eventually I would like to get to that point. We have a standing gig all the time. So that's the first thing. And then, like, if I know that you, Alice, are capable of doing, this particular type of character, and, so you may come in as Dracula. I may have already gone, okay, I want you to play Dracula. So you may come in as that, or you may come in, I know that you're capable of doing 4 or 5 different voices. Would you mind trying these 3 or 4? And so we'll sit around and do that through the discovery process at the table read. Fortunately, I deal with actors that don't have, and this is going to be really ironic, I deal with actors that don't have major egos.
It must be because you're in Cincinnati. That must be it.
I have very generous actors that will come in, and and even if the folks that I do post a notice for, they'll come in and I'll have them do a small audition. Generally, it's over the phone, quite honestly, because I don't want to tie somebody up for a massive audition process if I know I'm only hiring 2 different actors. So, and what I'll ask them is, when we sit around for that second read, I'll go, does anybody feel like they want to tackle this particular character? And some people will say yes, some people will say no, and we give it a try, and everybody gets a shot at it.
Nice. So one last question. Since radio drama is from the past and is kind of considered, quote unquote, old-fashioned, what makes it appealing to today's audience?
That's a great question. I think people forgot that this is how things are created. I think that's one of the appeals to it, because one of the things we also do that I don't think I mentioned, we dress up in period costuming.
No, you didn't mention that.
Do encourage, so if an actor is playing 2 or 3 different parts, I encourage that actor to change clothing. So, like, for example, we did Miracle on 34th Street, and one of the actors was the judge as well as the guy who is in the department store. I can't think of the guy's name, who was in charge of trying to find Santa Claus. Mm-hmm. So that actor then just put on a robe, a graduation robe, to play the judge. Mm-hmm. And he actually went a little overboard and put on a wig. But then, took that off to go back to the department store character. So yes, people can see that in their imagination as they're hearing it because he used different voices. Mm-hmm. But I also bring that bit of theatricality to it. That's why we call it the Cincinnati Radio Actors Theater, because we do bring those kinds of things to light. So I think that's one of the engaging things that keeps people interested in it. And the fact that the sound effects, I make sure the sound effects team is prominent right up front. They're not hidden behind the actors. They're right there with them. And the actors interact with the sound effects team. So if someone has to pull a gun, we don't use a real gun. We don't use a gun with blanks. You use a clipboard, an old-fashioned clipboard. The way you brace it against your stomach kind of muffles the sound. So the actor will do the finger point with the thumb, and then he shoots, and then the sound effects guy watches his finger, and that's where the gunfire happens. So it's interactive. I've tried to bring the PlayStation mentality to radio drama.
Cool. So you also have a sound effects person as part of your team.
We have a sound effects team.
Okay.
And one of the things that I do like to do, so if you have a smaller part, you swap off. My actors will also do the sound effects. So when they're not doing a voice, they will go over and participate in a lot of the sound effects. And that's kind of where the improv thing comes in a little bit too. We've discovered that, this person needs to walk to the door and open the door. We don't just open the door. We will have footsteps leading up to the door. That stuff's a lot of times not written in the script. So you discover that through the process of that table read even.
Nice. Well, Shawn, unfortunately, it's about time. And I just want to say thank you so much for being our guest. Is there any upcoming Cincinnati Radio Actors Theater shows that you'd like to promote in the next month or so that you'd like to share?
We're hoping to get something booked in August. I can't really give you the details of that because we're having contract negotiations, Alice.
Ooh, nice. Fancy.
I'll be sure to check in with you all the time and then let you know what's going on. And this has been a lot of fun. I'm really happy to be part of the inaugural podcast as you've been the host. So this is fun.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for listening to my inaugural podcast of the Actors Resource. Soon, you'll be able to subscribe on iTunes, and especially important, please leave questions that you would love to hear the answers to regarding acting and/or improv. I would love for this to be a podcast that will help you, the listeners. Thank you so much.